Okay, welcome to Chapter 4. 4.1 is percents and fractions. And we've talked about this. This is stuff that we've worked on before. At least some of us have. And we're going to keep working on it. We have to remember that a percent and a fraction are very similar to each other. A percent is interesting because it's a part of 100. So 60% is the same thing as 60 out of 100. Okay? It can be written like this. It can also be written as 30 out of 50, or it could be written out of 3 out of 5, or it could even be written 6 out of 10. We could write decimals about 60%. I want you to notice here that these two are pronounced the same. Okay, if you read this one, this is 60 hundredths. And if you pronounce this one, this is 0 and 60 hundredths. So if it's 60 hundredths, we can write it as a fraction, a decimal, or as a percent. So it's something pretty easy to use. We look at the fraction 60 over 100, and we need to notice that this top number is talking about how many. We'll call it parts. That's what the book calls it. The line here, that the fraction bar, is the word per. And down here, obviously, it's 100. Okay, so for instance, if we say parts per 100, we read these parts per 100. Excuse me. If you have all of them, 100 parts per 100, that sounds a little bit silly, but it's all of them. See, 100 parts per 100 is equal to 100%. That's everything. Now, believe it or not, you can actually have more than 100%. You can have 200 parts per 100, and this is improper fraction, and it still equals 200%. Okay, that's the kind of thing that we have to look at. Okay, we're gonna work through this as we go. The book likes to give you these little boxes that stand for 100, and for one, it stands for one whole. Okay, so this is like 1, not an H, we need a W. 1 whole, okay? And if you break the box up into 100 pieces, I don't know if I can do this, so bear with me. I gotta get it close. Here's 3. Counting the white spaces: 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, yeah, one more line gives us 2 more. Ooh, that's kind of a crooked one, but that's okay. So that should be 10. And if we come along here, a 10 by 10 is 100, right? There's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then the last one's got to be kind of small, 9, 10. Okay, so this is like 100 hundredths. Okay, 100 per 100 is 100%. So this is everything. Now, if we were to shade in using a tool, I don't know which tool to use. Let's try this one. See what happens. We shade in all of these. I'll try not to pick it up so that I can erase. And then, okay, if we do it like that, go back to our toolbar. All right, so each line, each column is 10. So we got 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 1, 2, 3. So this is 53 out of 100. It's 53 hundredths, which is, as a decimal, looks like this. But it also happens to be 53%. And this is kind of a neat thing. If there's a decimal with two place values after it, the tenths place and the hundredths place, you can count those as hundredths. And you can change that into a percentage. If you write down just 50 hundredths, that could be written as 5/10. Either way, it's still 50%. And if 5/10 is 50%, I bet you can guess what 0.7, which is 7/10. What does that equal to? That equals 70%. 7 out of 10. 7/10 looks like 7/10. And that's the same thing as 70/100ths. So if we write it like this, we can also add a 0 and not change the meaning. That gives us hundredths. We get 70%. Okay? That works pretty well. Alright, so you're going to see stuff like that. What happens if we have more than 100? For instance, if we have 1.32. Well, this is like one whole, or these little boxes that they use, plus the 3 of the tenths, plus 2 of the hundredths, and that is going to be 100 and 32. See, 100 plus 32 all over 100. So it's like 132 hundredths. It's an improper fraction. It's like one whole plus 32 hundredths. So this would be like 1 and 32 hundredths. But if we write it like this, we can recognize that the percentage is 132%. So 1.32 translates into 132%. All kinds of things that you can do here. If they ask you to go the other direction, which they might do, they might say, what is 45% written as a fraction? Well, you can simply go 45 over 100 and you're there. Okay? And if you have to write it in simplest form, which we tend to have to do whenever we're doing fractions, then you decide, well, what can I divide both 45 and 100 by? I can divide this one by 9, but I can't divide 100 by 9. At least not very well. I can divide this one by 5, and I can also divide 100 by 5. So that gives me 45 divided by 5 is 9. 100 divided by 5 is 20ths. So 9/20ths is the simplified version of 45%. So 45% equals 9/20ths. And actually, in this case, 45% makes more sense. It's easier to understand. But if we have, some other number like 75%, we would write that as 75 over 100. And after we go to the work of dividing, simplifying this, I'm going to go quick. I hope you know this already because it's something you should possibly know. 75 is divisible by 25 and 100 is also divisible by 25. So you get 3 because 3 times 25 is 75, and you get 4 because 4 times 25 is 100. So 75% is equal to 3/4. That's the way it goes. There's some other things to do. You could write a fraction as a percent, so they could give you 1/4 and ask you to change it to a percent. And the easiest way to do that is to change this denominator into a 100. And so you look at this and you say, well, does 4 go into 100 or does it go into 10? Because if it'll go into 10, it'll go into 100 too. And sure enough, this is another one that you should know. If I multiply 4 times 25, I get 100. And so I'm going to multiply the 1 times the same thing. And I should get 25. Okay? So 1/4 equals 25 hundredths. So 1/4 equals 25%. If you can get it to a 100, you can turn it into a percent. Now, maybe they haven't showed you this, but you can also do this as a decimal. They're not going to make you do it in the book, but since we just finished using long division to to work this F out, I think I should show you just real quick, just for your own knowledge. 1/4 is the same thing as 1 divided by 4, which is the same thing as 4 into 1. And we add a decimal. 1 can be written like this, 1.00. Go ahead and do the long division. 4 goes into 1 0 times, but it goes into 10 twice. 2 times 4 is 8. And subtract. 10 take away 8 is 2. And bring down the 0. We have a 20, and 4 goes into that nicely 5 times. So 1/4 is equal to 0.25. But it's all, which is, if you read this, 0 and 25 hundredths. So 25 hundredths is obviously 25%. I just want you to see it because it's really cool. They all just go together. It's just natural. It's a little harder with something. I'm looking at one of the problems they have in the book. This one says you delete 7/8 of the pictures on a digital camera. So this is harder. You have a bunch of pictures and you delete 7/8 of them. What this really means is that out of every 8 pictures, you delete 7 of them. So if you have 8 pictures, you only have 1 left. If you have 16 pictures, since that's 2 times 8, you only have 2 left. But if you have 100, it's a little harder to figure out. And they want us to go into a percentage, which means going into 100. So they're going straight, in the book, they're going straight to the fact that 7/8 is equal to 0.875. And you can't do that unless you just know that. You don't just know that, so you have to do long division. So I'm really glad I showed you that long division. 7/8 is 8 into 7, or 7 divided by 8. And I'm going to go ahead and put 3 zeros out and prove it to you. 8 goes into 7 0 times. Change colors here. 8 goes into 70 8 times. 8 times 8 is 64. And 70 take away 64 is 6. And bring down the 0. 8 goes into 60 7 times, which is 56. 60 minus 56 is 4. Bring down the 0. And 8 goes into 40 5 times, evenly. 5 times 8 is 40. It's a good thing you guys learned how to do long division. You can see that I got the same answer. 7/8 is 0 and 875 thousandths, or 0.875. So if I write this out, I can't write it as hundredths. If it were 87, that would be 87 hundredths. If I rounded it up to 88, because this 5 is big, I'd get 88 hundredths. But it's not really. It's 875 over 1,000. And I'm going to show you a neat little trick. If you divide by 10, 1,000 divided by 10 is 100. Okay, so we're going to divide the top and the bottom by 10. We're going to simplify it. Divide by 10 on the top. That's supposed to be division. Divide by 10 on the top, divide by 10 on the bottom. What do we get? Well, I'm going to skip the top one first. We know what 1,000 divided by 10 is. That's 100. Okay, and if it were 870 divided by 10, it would just be 87. But since it's 875 divided by 7, what we have to do is sneak a decimal in there. So 875 over 1,000 is the same as 87.5 over 100. And if it's in 100, we can write it as a percent. Okay, so what you actually have to do is you have to write this. This is kind of a combination. It's a percent and it's a decimal. It's 87.5%. This really means it's 87.5%. It would round up to 88% if you were trying to round it, but it's 87.5% or 87.5%. Okay, and that's kind of the real life application. Sometimes you run into fractions and they don't work out perfectly. Sometimes it just doesn't work. Sometimes it does. If they say write 31/50ths as a percent, that's easy. You're just going to go straight to 100, and to do that, you're going to multiply by 2, because 50 times 2 is 100. You're going to multiply by 2, and 31 times 2, you can do this in your head. 30 times 2 is 60. 1 times 2 is 2. 31 times 2 is 62. So 62 out of 100 is 62. 62%. You guys are getting the idea. I can see this. The hardest ones are going to be those ones that go up to 1,000 or something like that. So you're writing percents as fractions in simplest form. For instance, here's a hard one, 23.9%. How do I write that as a fraction? Well, we have to do what I just showed you, but we're going to do it in reverse. This means 23.9 over 100. And since I don't like this pesky decimal, I'm going to multiply by 10. And I'm going to get 239 over 1,000. See how this is just the reverse of what we did back on the other page. 23.9 times 10 is 239. We just move that decimal over. Okay, that's how that works. We move this decimal over by multiplying by 10, and we have to add a 0 to it to do it. 1,000. So 239 thousandths. And then the question is, can I divide this by anything? And this is where you're going to actually have to get out your calculator and do some guessing. Because it's not going to divide by 3, it's not going to divide by 9, it's not going to divide by 5 or 4. So I think there's a pretty good chance that this isn't going to work. That's not what I wanted to do. Everything is gone. There we go. Still too big. Sorry about that. Sometimes I do some weird thing to this software and it just disappears. We'll call that good enough. All right. So I'm going here, going to the dashboard, get the calculator, and forgot what it was. 239 divided by 1,000. So we're going to clear this out. Hopefully you can see it. I know it's a little smaller on yours. Where's the clear? MC. Oh, here it is. One more time. 239 times 1,000. 239 divided by 1,000. And I know that it's not going to come out evenly. It's 0.239. So there's not a lot. We could do some guessing. We could try dividing by 4. 239 divided by 4. Let's try it. 239 divided by 4 equals 59.75. Clear it again. 239 divided by 8 equals 29.875. I'm running out of options. I'm going to have to assume that it's not going to work evenly. So if I write this as a fraction in simplest form, let's just assume that that's the simplest form. We can use the answer key to prove that if we need to. We can talk about it in class. And we'll just kind of let it go for now. Okay, the other thing is write the fraction as a percent. So you could take 1/5, write it as a percent. You could go straight to tenth. Let's see. This is still, let's go, not 88%, 103. I guess that's as close as I can get. 5 times 2 is 10. Remember, you have to multiply. 1 times 2 is 2, so 2/10, which is the same as 20/100ths, which is the same as 20%. All right. Now, I'm going to pause it just for a second. I'll be right back. Thing I can figure out, it's asking which method you used when you're writing a fraction as a percent. It didn't show us 2 methods, other than it showed us some that don't work very well. They don't go right into 100, or they don't go right into 10. And so we have to use something else. And most of the ones they give us have to do with like a value of 8 or 16. So like 7/16. We have to figure out what percentage that is. We can't go to 10. We can't go to 100. We can't even go to 1,000. We might be able to go to 1,000. But I actually don't think we do. So we are left with long division. 7 divided by 16, which is 16 into 7. And this is, they're not going to give you too many of these, but you might have a few. 16 goes into 70, 7 0 times, but 70 goes into more than that. Let's see, 10 goes into 70 7 times, so let's try. It's a lot more than 10, so let's try 4. 4 times 6 is 24. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 2 is 6. So 64, that works. 70 take away 64 is 6. And we got a 60. So we got to do this 3. 3 times 6 is 18. But carry our little 1, and that's 48. I'm running out of room, guys. This is 12. Bring down the 0. 16. I'm just going to throw out a 9 and see what happens. 9 times 6 is 54. 9 plus 5 is 14. Oh, way too big. Let's try 18. 8 times 6. We're going to get rid of all these. 8 times 6 is 48. Change that to an 8. 8 times 1 plus 4 is 12. That's still too big. So 7 is going to be what we get. And we're not going to get a good answer. We're going to have to just keep on going. And so, you get something like this, you're going to have to just keep on going until you get an end, or you're going to have to round it. Like if I were to round this one, I would round this to 0.44. So this is about 44 over 100. So it means it's about 44%. And I could kind of guess that because 7 out of 16, that's what we started with, is close to 1/2, right? 8 out of 16 is exactly 1/2, and 1/2 is 50%. So this is close. It's 44%. You get a problem like that, we'll figure it out. But generally, it's going to go just like you want it to. All right, long enough on this video. You guys have a great evening.